Okay, so picture this for a second. You're the chief information officer at a massive enterprise, and you're staring down your IT budget for the year. We are pouring absolute mountains of capital into AI right now. I mean, it's everywhere. But where is all that money actually going? Well, in today's explainer, we're going to take a trip up and down the AI supply chain to figure out how the underlying economics are shifting, literally right beneath our feet. We're talking a massive shift from the guys building the infrastructure all the way up to the model labs.
To really wrap our heads around this shift, we kind of have to look at our own enterprise bills. Nearly $11 million. Just let that sink in for a second. That right there is the annualized rate that a single firm, SemiAnalysis, is spending just on Anthropic Claude tokens. Just one firm. As a corporate buyer, you have to ask yourself, why on earth are we suddenly totally fine with that kind of sticker shock? Well, the answer comes down to one thing: the absolutely undeniable return on investment.
See, Agentic AI has completely flipped the script. We aren't just using AI to, draft a polite follow-up email anymore. We have agents literally building out complex financial models and crunching earnings reports. Work that used to take human teams tens of hours and cost thousands of dollars is now being knocked out in a few minutes for, a couple bucks in compute? When you start seeing ROIs of 40, 60, even 80 times, replacing a $1,000 human task with $20 in AI tokens, the explosive demand makes total sense. You'd be crazy not to buy in. But here's where the economics get truly wild for us buyers. At first glance, the sticker price for a top-tier frontier model looks pretty steep, right? Like maybe $5 for input and $25 for output per million tokens. But these agentic workloads rely super heavily on context caching. It's almost like a cheat code that pushes cache hit rates over 90%. Add in these massive input-to-output ratios, and our actual real-world blended price plunges down to just 99 cents per million tokens. We are extracting unbelievable value from these models, and ironically, it's getting drastically cheaper to actually consume them. Now, you might be thinking, okay, if the blended price is dropping for us, the AI labs must be taking a massive hit to their profits, right? Actually, no, it's the exact opposite. Because it's getting exponentially cheaper to produce these tokens, this massive economic surplus is completely ballooning the model labs' gross margins. Anthropic, for example, saw their inference gross margins rocket from 38% to over 70%, all while their overall revenue is just exploding. These model labs are suddenly swimming in profit. So wait, how exactly are tokens getting so cheap to make? Honestly, a huge chunk of it is just pure software optimization. By dialing in advanced parallelization and entirely new software architectures on the exact same hardware, the amount of tokens generated per second can jump 14 times. Without physically swapping a single piece of silicon on the data center, these labs are suddenly pumping out tokens 14 times faster. That just crushes the cost of production. And what happens when they actually do upgrade the hardware? Well, the throughput gains go completely parabolic. When you factor in the leap from older H100 architectures to highly optimized GB300 systems, especially when they use lower precision formats, throughput skyrockets 32 times higher. The underlying cost to literally just generate a token is falling through the floor right now. And all that new profitability? It's shifting straight into the pockets of the inference providers. Which brings us to a really crucial realization about the market right now. Basically, any lab that can provide true frontier quality intelligence is going to charge based on the economic value they deliver, rather than trying to undercut their competitors' margins. Because compute is still highly constrained, and the ROI for enterprises like ours is just off the charts, demand is completely outstripping supply. Open source models are great, sure, but they just aren't matching frontier quality for heavy-duty knowledge work yet. So these top-tier AI labs are capturing all this value simply based on their utility. They literally don't need to engage in a price war. But hang on, hold up a second. If the model labs are practically printing money with 70+% margins, and corporate buyers like us are reaping 80x ROIs, we've got to ask the multi-trillion-dollar question here. Why haven't the foundational hardware monopolies like TSMC and Nvidia flinched? Why aren't they just jacking up their own prices to scoop up this massive economic surplus? After all, it's their hardware that makes this entire AI revolution physically possible. To figure that out, we have to zoom out and look at the actual physical bottlenecks in the hardware supply chain. The absolute tightest constraint right now is TSMC's CoWoS packaging. There are literally zero alternatives at scale, none. Right behind that is high bandwidth memory, which is controlled by a super tight oligopoly. Then comes the logic fab. And amazingly, the absolute least physically constrained layer of this whole stack is Nvidia's actual GPU chip design. Yet the market largely prices everything as if the GPU design itself is the scarcest thing out there.
See, Nvidia and TSMC are still sort of anchored to old-school cost-based pricing. They look at what it costs to manufacture the chip, tack on a really healthy margin, and that's the price. It's a very pre-AI mindset. But this new agentic AI reality, it demands value-based pricing. Enterprises are so desperate for compute to hit those crazy ROIs that we are optimizing purely for access, not for cost. Think about it. If Nvidia literally doubled server prices tomorrow, we'd complain, for sure, but we'd still buy them because the tokens are just that incredibly valuable to our bottom line.
Now, Nvidia isn't exactly asleep at the wheel here. They know what's happening. They just need a new lever to start capturing a bigger slice of this expanding value pie. And it looks like they found it with something called SOCM. That stands for System on Chip Attached Memory Module. For their upcoming Rubin-class systems, instead of soldering memory directly onto the board like they always have, they're decoupling it into this totally separate socketed module.
It is honestly a brilliant three-step maneuver. First, by decoupling the memory, it suddenly becomes its own distinct line item on the invoice. Second, Nvidia uses their sheer weight as a massive procurement powerhouse to secure this highly constrained memory from suppliers, and then they apply a really hefty markup. We're talking around 60%. And third, this lets Nvidia expand their overall system margins entirely independently. They can keep the margin on the actual compute board looking relatively normal so customers don't riot, while quietly making an absolute fortune playing the role of memory middlemen.
And because NVIDIA is essentially the only scaled customer for this specific type of module right now, they've reportedly been able to secure these massive preferential long-term agreements. They're paying an estimated contract price of around $8 per gigabyte starting in early 2026. They are using their dominant market position to effectively lock down the absolute scarcest resource in the entire system before anyone else can even pull up a chair to the table.
Now, as we move through the next year, the underlying cost of that memory is projected to climb pretty significantly. We're looking at exiting 2026 at over $13 a gigabyte, just because supply is so incredibly tight. And as those baseline costs rise, NVIDIA is just going to pass them right along, plus their sweet markup, of course, straight to the buyers. And corporate customers like us will have absolutely no choice but to pay up, because maximizing our access to AI compute is literally the only way our businesses are going to stay competitive.
Which leaves us with a huge and honestly kind of provocative question to wrap up this explainer. Right now, the AI model labs are capturing a massive, disproportionate share of the surplus value being generated by agentic AI. They're sitting pretty on 70% margins while riding on structurally underpriced silicon. So, will foundational hardware monopolies like Nvidia and TSMC finally wake up, ditch their cost-based roots, and start fully pricing to the massive economic value they're enabling? Or are the model labs and inference providers going to continue running away with the lion's share of this AI revolution's profits? As a corporate buyer, watching this tug of war is going to dictate exactly where my entire IT budget goes for the next decade. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and seriously, keep a close eye on those memory prices.